Working Dragon Mystic, where we discuss real metaphysical and occult knowledge so that you can manifest real and tangible results in your life. This week, we're going to be discussing something I've been getting a lot of questions about, and this time of year being Halloween and all, I think it's a great time to talk about it, and that is reincarnation. So, Bob, if you'll take care of the announcements, hopefully, I'll see you all in a second.
Greetings, this is Remy the Raccoon. I am stepping in while Lena is hunting down Bob. Check out the online courses and live Zoom workshops at workingdragonmystic.com. Just click on the online courses tab. Also, consider supporting the channel by becoming a channel subscriber. Each tier gets special members-only perks. Woohoo! Or check out our merchandise like coffee cups, coffee, art, travel mugs, and more. All links can be found below, and if you're new here, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you are notified anytime there is a new video or live stream. Unlike me, I forget things a lot, so I need notifications. That reminds me, where is Bob? Bob? Bobby? Bob? Oh well, I'll remember sometime. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Okay, reincarnation, the cycle of life. Life after we pass on, whatever you want to call it. This is a massive topic, and everybody has an opinion, and everybody has a view, and some people agree, some people do not. It is massive. And to be in all honesty, in all candidness, if you really look at it across the philosophical spectrum, there's not a human being on this planet who actually knows the genuine truth, the full truth, and the entirety of the picture. That just is what it is. I do have a viewpoint. I do have research and thoughts on the matter. And anytime I am asked about it, that is where I go to. Now, if you are a religious individual and your particular faith or religion says this is what happens when you die, I'm not going to argue it. That's what you believe. That's your faith. I respect that. Now, many of you know I come from a background where I was raised religious. And I was told certain things were, this is how it is. This is what happens when you die. A lot of it made no sense. The concept of a compassionate God who can just chuck you into a lake of fire doesn't work. It didn't make sense. And then you study theology, you study deeper past just what the preachers are screaming at you, and you notice it doesn't really add up either. And then you look across at different peoples throughout the world, and you realize they've never heard of your crazy God. Yeah, they haven't. As big as Christianity got when I was in the church and all that, it's actually possible to still find people who's never heard. Doesn't really make for an all-powerful, omnipresent divinity to seem so all-powerful and omnipresent. But you can look across and you can see commonalities and themes throughout religion. Okay. Then you step away from religion and you start looking at spirituality and philosophies. And you start looking into magic and magicians, and eventually you're going to come around to soul travel, and well, astral travel first, and eventually soul travel. And you're going to be starting, theoretically, to ask your own questions and pursue some answers. Well, that's what I did, because I wanted to understand how certain things work. Now, here's some questions. We're going to discuss reincarnation and my thought process and how I got there and my findings through that process. First question is, if we have evidence of ghosts and hauntings, and there is a indefinable afterlife of you go here, how do we have ghosts? Because see, if you die and you go to heaven, or you go to Valhalla, or you go to Asgard, or you go to the Elysian Fields, or you go to Nirvana, wherever it is you go, how is there a ghost still hanging around? That don't make sense. If your spirit has moved on, that don't make sense. And then people's like, well, they get stuck. Okay, so you're going to tell me that an all-powerful being just lets you get stuck and basically bypass whatever fate may be in the great by and by. I mean, if it's a reward, hey, that sucks. If it's punishment, well, it don't make sense for them to just let you linger on Earth, does it? So that didn't make sense, because I love paranormal stuff. I've loved it since I was little. And of course, we've got plenty of paranormal investigators out there collecting data that shows there's actually something tangible to hauntings. We're actually starting to see data. There is plenty spiritual out there we don't understand and we can't quantify yet with science. Doesn't mean we're not trying. So that's got to raise questions, doesn't it? Okay. So there's that. And then there is, of course, the question we have today. Reincarnation. If the afterlife speaks of you enjoying an afterlife and you going on and you know living your happiness and whatever, but reincarnation's in the picture as well, that means you go to live the happily ever after, but you also go back to work. Happily ever after, back to work. Happily ever after, back to work. There's a disconnect in the concepts. These are questions I wanted to answer as I set forward. Now, in my research, in my findings, in my travels through soul travel and through evocations, working with different entities, specifically entities that deal with death and the afterlife and such, I came to realize that the soul, as we know it, is an incomplete thought. We think of a soul as you can take this little soul and you put it into this meat suit and that's it. It fits nice and perfectly like a puzzle piece. You go through life, you live your life, you gain your experiences, your meat suit kicks the bucket, you go off into the great by and by to whatever afterlife it is you believe in. Okay. What I've found out, however, is the soul is a much larger, much more massive concept of consciousness than we humans can really wrap our brains around. And that what we personally currently view as a soul is just a minor fraction, minor fragment of that greater consciousness. And every lifetime is a piece of that consciousness coming to the material plane to learn and experience things. Okay? And it takes all that learning, it takes all that experience, and it moves on. This means that technically every soul can end up in multiple afterlives based on the experiences and the life that the particular fragment chose. So we could be scattered across afterlives. Now, reincarnation is essentially the process of the next fragment moving in. This also means a living individual could evoke a past life version of themselves because the two fragments are not the same. You could evoke the old fragment and speak with it and learn from it. Pretty easy. Now, of course, the question's like, well, Drake, where do ghosts come from? I have actually found that most afterlives do not function as a finite end of journey. You can actually move in and out of most of them. And because of that, you can actually choose to stay here. That fragment is not forced to move on. It can hang around if it so chooses or it feels need. And that fragment could indeed become a haunting. Now, we do know most hauntings probably aren't those type of fragments. They're probably thought forms or other things, or even energetic echoes, if you will, which I'm having trouble thinking of the exact name for the haunting. Instead of an intelligent haunting, it's more of a impression on the environment. It just replays over and over. It'll come to me after I turn the camera off, I know it. Those have nothing to do with the fragments. Only an intelligent haunting would have anything to do with the fragments. But I go through all that because reincarnation is that process. You got that larger, greater soul that doesn't have a chance to fit in a human body, breaking off thousands of fragments that are constantly going to the physical plane. They're living their life. They're having all those experiences, and when their time's up, they move on. And eventually another piece of this greater soul comes down, moves along the physical plane, and goes into the afterlife. Okay? Another piece breaks off, comes to the physical plane, moves through, goes to the afterlife. Now, all this is part of the process of experience for the entirety of the soul. And ideally, what's going to happen is along this journey, along this point, somewhere, that identity of a particular shard is going to figure it out. It's going to start picking up information, and it's going to learn, and it's going to get to the point where it figures out the concept of ascent or enlightenment, if you believe in these concepts. And at that point of ascent and enlightenment, that identity becomes the dominant identity of the soul, and all the fragments are going to come together again. All that knowledge, all that information of all the fragments is going to come together. And the massive soul that we can't possibly understand as a human actually takes shape and takes form and becomes an entity of the planes, not a physical entity. It becomes an entity that lives and works within the planes at that point. So in essence, really, our soul is more of a gestation period, a seed. And every one of those fragments is just part of it growing and learning to the point where that seed can blossom and take form and be, well, I guess, born and birthed into the multiverse to go further and continue its learning. I know that's a little much for some people. Some people like the ideal of, I die, I'm reborn. I die, I'm reborn. But that leaves a lot of unanswered questions there. And I'm not saying that this particular point in my research answers all the questions. It doesn't. There's still a lot to learn. And I'm always open to reworking what I know. But when I'm asked about reincarnation, when I'm asked about the soul, when I'm asked about this process, I can only speak from my findings. I can only speak from all the work I've done, all the notes I've collected, and all the things that I've found that seem, at this point, to prove to be the most truthful and functional information I have. You all know I'm not a particularly religious person. I rely more on data. So that's really all I can speak to, and this is my findings. Interestingly enough, these findings also really work with most, if not all, the major religions out there, which would by and by make their views also true. So it really seems to fit the most, it seems to fit best in most, if not all, paradigms, if that makes sense. And that, to me, is kind of a reassuring factor. Now, again, I'm open to altering it. I may learn more later. I'm sure I'm going to learn something about the process once I finally leave this rock. But until that point, I don't think anyone's going to truly know the great beyond until they leave. But I hope this has helped a little bit, because right now, this time of year, I know we're dealing with a lot of, it's Halloween. It's the spirit time. Myself, I spend a lot of time at this time of year working with Hel from the Norse mythology, working with Odin. Also, I do a lot of ancestor work this time of year. And I know that when I call upon those ancestors, I'm calling upon those pieces. And I know that they are still out there. I know that the them I knew, or the them that I didn't get to know, it's out there. And yes, there may be a different fragment wandering around the earth, but in my mind, at the very least, it's a part of the greater whole, but it's not necessarily them. I don't know. I know for some people it's more comforting to think that they're still wandering around the earth somewhere. For me, it's not. But it is a piece of them that's here, so you could also take comfort in that, depending on your views. I don't know. But I love to do ancestor work, and that's one reason I have tried to understand spirits and the afterlife and possible reincarnation. Because to me, I needed to know how it worked. I needed to know the why. Because if it's just one soul and it's reincarnating constantly, there shouldn't be any ghosts. And because you reincarnate, no ghost. Or there shouldn't be anything to call upon for ancestral work because there's nothing out there. It's all being reincarnated. That didn't make sense. Even if you account for you only reincarnate until you get it right. That still doesn't make sense because we have way too many ghosts and way too many ancestors for that cycle to make sense to me. However, with what I've learned on the other side and working in the planes and from these entities that work with spirits and death, this larger picture of that process and cycle, now it makes sense. Now it functions on all the different paradigms. And to me, I find that particularly interesting. I'm not saying you have to agree with me. I'm not saying if you have a faith or a religious belief that you should change it. In fact, I respect your individual religions and beliefs, and I know faith is very important to a lot of people, and it is very helpful to a lot of people. There's times I wish it had been helpful to me, but it wasn't. I had to find a different road, but I found it. But to each our own and our own path. But at the very least, I hope this video gives you something to think about, to meditate on, and ponder on, if nothing else. And if you think I'm a lunatic and my ideals are crazy, I respect that. Feel free to share your thoughts on the process or ideals below. Everyone keep it respectful. No religion bashing, no spirituality bashing, none of that. Keep it respectful below. Let's share our ideals. Let's share our wisdoms. Let's try to grow together. None of us know the full picture. We can't. Okay? But if we share our knowledge, if we share our wisdom, maybe we can get a better view of the larger picture. Anyways, I'm Drake. This has been Working Dragon Mystic, and that noise tells me it's time to go. You all have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Take care. Bye-bye.